Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. I was picked up by a high school friend around 3 p.m. on June 12, 1995. She was relocating back to town and had recently passed her driver's test. I was grounded because I was found coming home in the early morning hours while my father was working the previous weekend. My parents had divorced 60 days before. I stayed with my father in the only house I had ever lived in. I contacted my father on his cell phone and asked him to let her pick me up so we could see our other friend. He reluctantly granted me permission. The house of the second friend was about 4 miles away. We'd drive a poorly paved rural road with a series of minor hills, the second to last of which was the steepest. Every slope would give the vehicle traveling 30 miles per hour a tummy tingle. My friend knew that the local kids would jump the slopes on everything from four-wheelers to snowmobiles. I looked at the pace we were going as we came down the road and around the turn. She was driving a silver Geo Prism. It had a digital speedometer. I quickly told her to slow down and warned her of the approaching hills. I grew raised as a tomboy, so I was familiar with and aware of machines in nature, and I realized she couldn't drive the car with the speed we were traveling. The speedometer was reaching 50 miles per hour. She had a bubbly attitude, was a bit of a jokester, and was an upbeat teenager. She ignored my advice and accelerated. I repeated myself as I reached around and began to fasten my seatbelt. I always wore my seatbelt, but our family's practice was to fasten our seatbelts when we reached the stop sign at the start of the freeway, not before that time, and not on rural roads. The next thing I remember is waking up to the sound of a stalled and running motor, dust and smoke, and the sight of my predicament. My right arm was twisted in such a way that the backside of my hand was facing me, as if it were the palm of my hand. And I panicked and reached for the car door handle to get myself out, but my arm wouldn't move and the door didn't open. I recall thinking to myself, I have to be dreaming, right? And then glancing around the car. In front of me, I noticed long, dark hair hanging from the windshield. I noticed a shattered radio console. Then I noticed a blonde girl resting her head on a partially deflated airbag to my left. Who's that girl? I wondered to myself. When I looked down on my arm, I noticed a large bump poking through my orange sweater with blood dripping everywhere. Then I realized there was blood on my face, in my eyes, and I could smell and taste it. This was not a dream, I realized. God, please God, I yelled. I yelled so hard that my voice broke. My objective with my call was to literally summon my God and his angels to save me right now. I never once doubted that God was not present, but I screamed loud enough for God to hear me. At the same time, I saw the blonde female was moving. Then I noticed a dazzling white light with the palest and lightest yellow tinge approaching. It appeared to be coming from the sky, and despite getting closer, it didn't appear to be that far away to begin with. But the moment I saw it, someone said, I'm here. You're going to be fine. It's fine to close your eyes and sleep. I'll be there for you. I'm here. It was a being, but I didn't hear a voice or see a human shape. However, something was translated for me, and it was true. There are no words to explain it. It was the light, and it was my God. I felt immediately comforted and unafraid. I trusted what was being communicated to me. I closed my eyes in relief. 5 days later, I awoke in a room with my father and grandfather seated in chairs adjacent to the bed I was in. When my father noticed me, he leapt up and summoned a nurse. Soon after, a doctor arrived. They immediately began asking me simple questions, such as what year it was, who was president, what my home phone number was, and so on. I responded to them. Then I inquired, somewhat angrily, what the hell happened and why I was here. They began asking me questions about that day before telling me. The only thing I recall is what I said above, without the reason I was in the car, where I was going, and who I was with. I remember the light and the scene in the automobile right after the crash. Nothing else was going on around the accident. My initial account came from my father and a message written by a friend. I don't recall any personal accounts from the prior school year, but I remembered the education I received and did not have to redo any classes. I had an encounter just before waking up and seeing my father and grandfather. I've thought about it as much as I've seen the light over the years. I was surrounded by worldly folks before I awoke. Again, I'm at a loss for words. It appears that there are no words. There were many entities, one that appeared to be in command and translating for me. The entity appeared to be female. I appeared to be debating with her, saying that as much as I wanted to stay with her, I felt love and grief for my father, and that I wished I had had a kid before they removed me. The discussion was subtle and kind. There was no hostility, and despite the fact that there were two options on the table, I recall thinking that whichever option I was given would be fine. I recall her assuring me that if I returned, I'd have a child, but I also have a specific assignment. I chose to return to my previous life rather than stay with her. She said I required a lot of work, and that her bees would have to heal me before I could wake up and start healing on the outside. Then I was placed down and swarmed by thousands of bees. For several moments, they entered and exited my body in a rage. I still have phantom bee buzzing sensations and feelings of them invading and thrilling my body. They physically entered my ears, nose, and throat, and swarmed all throughout my entire body. My injuries were as follows. A severe compound fracture of my right arm. Where the middle fractured piece protruded from my arm, the EMTs applied a tourniquet to it. Dr. Fisk saved it for me, and I still have it. My left hip was pulled out of its socket, and about a quarter of the bone of the ball that sits in the hip socket was sheared off. 6 of my ribs were broken. A shattered nose. Because of a swelling scalp, I lost my hair to the windshield and needed numerous stitches throughout my scalp. On the palm side of my left hand, I embroidered. A bruised head and a burn on my right leg below the knee from the motor going in through and below the glove compartment. I was in the hospital for 10 days in total. They put me in a coma and mended my arm one day, my hip the next, and let me rest the rest of the time. I was at home in a makeshift hospital room and a wheelchair for months thereafter. For 12 weeks, my arm was in an open cast. My arm was stuck at a 90-degree angle as a result. To get it out again, I had to carry a 50-pound weight in my right arm. I knew it would hurt, but I didn't have a choice if I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to reach for things with my arm frozen. And I did it. After the accident, I was a completely different person. My character, the way I perceived and responded to individuals in the world,